Listen, out of all the topics of the combat sports, weight cutting is one of the ones that gets me the most fired up. I mean, it is absolutely riddled with bro science, which is why I decided to do an entire series on weight cutting alone. And this first video in that series is going to be addressing all the sayings we hear over and over again in our community. So without further ado, here's my presentation debunking some of the most bro scientific myths that we hear today. All right, welcome back all of you evidence-based killers. Trying to get that to stick. I'm not sure if that's going to actually stick, but tell me what you think about that. Today we're talking about weight cutting. I'm sure the intro let you know that, but I'm going to reiterate it. And specifically the bro science associated with it, and this is mainly geared towards grappling and fighting, since there is a particular culture around weight cutting there that needs to be discussed. I'm Patrick Jacobs, licensed physical therapist. It's very important. I see patients daily. And I have a fancy doctor of physical therapy, but even more importantly, especially for today, we're talking about bro science. I have a doctor of brolosophy, and I'll flash that up so everybody doesn't think that I'm lying. I don't know why I would be. So I'm uniquely qualified to talk about this. Let's get started. So the bro science, first thing we're going to lay out is the claims, right? The people, I don't know if they're claims, but I would call them pervasive cultural sayings that people say often that have a lot wrong with them, particularly scientifically wrong with them. But we hear them nonetheless, so we'll lay them out and then we'll go through one by one and talk about why all of them are bullshit. Classic. Bro, don't worry. I've only got 30 pounds to cut. Meanwhile, you're a month out. You'll have the strength of 190 at 170. Pipe dream. Oh yeah, bro, ramping up my training, trying to peak for the comp. It's like, dude, aren't you cutting? Yeah, I'm in a pretty aggressive caloric deficit right now. Clown. Oh, this is less of a saying, but you got your guys that lay, and this is particularly from a documentary that I watched that I'm sure some of you have also seen. Dudes laying in the sauna covered in towels, practically dying, and then in the comments, it's like, dude, you're a warrior. Nothing beats your dedication. You know, strong arm, salute emoji. Get the fuck out of here. All right, so the first one. Bro, don't worry. I've only got 30 pounds to cut. I've done this before. Meanwhile, you're a month out. All right. You can be almost 100% certain that you are minimizing the desired tissue that you want to lose. It's almost certainly going to be, the ratio of fat loss to muscle loss is not going to be what you want. And I think we can learn a little bit from, actually a lot of it in this regard, from the bodybuilding community particularly. They do a very good job at cutting weight while mitigating lean tissue loss. Particularly if you're cutting weight the way the conventional wisdom in the combat sports would say to cut weight, you're losing almost all water weight and probably even more muscle than you think, which is not good for performance. Your training and your recovery are going to suffer. If you are neglecting to give your body water and you are training with any degree of intensity, you're not going to be sleeping well. You are also not going to be thinking very well. I know you think that you will, but study after study has shown that if you're not sleeping well, then you are not performing to the best of your ability, really in any aspect of your life. So that's something to consider. And it leaves very little room for water and electrolyte manipulation. That's something we're going to talk about in a little bit later, later in the series, because I've decided to split these up. There's so much to talk about. So I'm going to split these up into a different number of videos, and you'll see kind of the structure a little bit later, but we'll talk a little bit more about water manipulation, electrolyte manipulation, which really only needs to be done in very specific circumstances, okay? So this guy, you'll have the strength, bro, you had the strength of 190 at 170. Give me a break. This is a pipe dream, and like this is the kind of pipe dream that it is. You remember when you were, let's say, a 3-stripe white belt, and you, maybe not even a 3-stripe, let's say a 1-stripe white belt. I'm gonna set the stage here. You know, you got new guys coming in, you got a stripe and they don't. You get a solid rear naked choke in, you do everything right? The guy doesn't know what he's doing. You throw your hooks in, you get your seat belt, you dig under the neck, you choke his bitch ass out, right? You are riding the high of a rear naked choke, the first submission, let's say this is the first submission, right? Everybody remembers their first submission. You're going home, you're playing, and you're in the radio, you're like, I'm a fucking badass.
Feel that, Alan? Huh? That tingling in your balls, big metal butterflies fluttering around your stomach?
I just choked this guy out at my local Kentucky gym. He's never trained a day in his life. I'm on top of the world. In fact, you're so on top of the world that you go home and you can't calm down. So what do? You live alone, of course, so you can't go to your girlfriend and ask for sex. So you grab your phone and you go into your bathroom and you start masturbating aggressively. Because it's really the only thing you have, right? Like I said, you're a loser. This video is not going to get monetized. Yeah, so aggressive masturbation. Post-nut clarity still doesn't kick in. That's how high you are. And so you think, man, this star, she's really attractive. And I'm really good at jiu-jitsu now. I'm going to DM her. So you slide into her DMs. You find her on Instagram. You slide into her DMs. You say, hey, I do jiu-jitsu. Send. Right? Because you never talk to women. Again, you live alone. And in your mind, you're thinking she's going to be like, wow. She's sliding through all of her 40,000 messages she gets a day, and she stops on yours, and she's like, man, this guy does jiu-jitsu. I think I'm going to fuck him. And then she messages you back. That's the kind of pipe dream that thinking that you're going to have the strength at 190 that you have at 170, that's the kind of pipe dream it is. Very long way to very long way to explain that, but there's literally no difference. Stupid. Weight classes are there for a reason, right? We know that people who weigh more have more muscle mass, can produce more force, okay? Whether it be through neural drive, more glycogen stores, they've had better time to recover. Let's imagine that you're the 190 that cut down to 170, and you probably did it really poorly, like we talked about in the first slide. You're almost certainly not going to have the neural drive or the glycogen stores that you should, and you're going up against, let's say, somebody who was 175, and they're walking around at their weight. They do a little bit of water manipulation, a little bit of electrolyte manipulation, and they're able to eat pretty much whatever they want. They're able to eat healthy. They're able to get really good training in up till that point because they just happen to weigh right above the threshold. Given that your technical ability is the same, that guy's going to wipe the fucking floor with you. Now, you may be somebody who's had a really successful, we'll say a successful cut in the fact that you cut down successfully, made weight, and you may have even won the tournament. You were probably way more technically proficient than that person. That shouldn't be your measure for performance. Because somebody, like I said, somebody who weighs a little bit over that and has done everything right, has the same amount of technical abilities, same belt level, same fighting, same level of fighter, same technical ability, would almost certainly beat you. And there is a small grain of truth to this. So let's say that you're relatively new and you are very overweight. You're over fat, we'll say. You have a high body fat percentage. It is possible to lose weight and to get stronger at the same time, and your performance get better because of that weight loss. But that is pretty much the only time, I won't say pretty much the only time, but that's one of the times that it could happen. But that does not give any sort of validity to this claim at all. So I think we've beat that one down. So we'll go to the next one. Yes, ramping up my training to meet for the comp, or to peak for the comp, but is also in an aggressive cut. This guy is the one you walk up to, you're like, dude, you're training pretty hard, you got a competition coming up? Yeah, I do. Yeah, we're getting some really good work in. It's like, you lost a lot of weight, right? Yeah, we're in a pretty aggressive cut too. The problem with being hypocaloric, I'll go ahead and put this up. The problem with being hypocaloric and trying to peak at the same time is that they're contradictory. I won't say they're completely mutually exclusive because in science, very, very few things are 100% black and white. But it's very hard to be catabolic and peak. And when I say catabolic, for those of you who don't know, there's anabolism and catabolism in this paradigm of vocabulary. So anabolism just refers to the body's ability to build complex molecules at the molecular level. That's what it means. And catabolism refers to the breaking down of complex molecules. So for anabolism, think of something like muscle protein synthesis, and catabolism, think of like breaking down glucose during exercise. So those are the different states your body can be in. And then kind of in between would be like a homeostatic like where your body's just kind of living. It's very hard to be in a catabolic state and peak, because whenever you're peaking, by definition, you are ramping up and you're trying to develop as much skill as you can and put your body in certain situations that you're going to be in a competition, which are very intense given the nature of our sport. And if you're in a catabolic state, if you're hypocaloric, your recovery is going to suffer, right? Just like the last week we talked about. And you're also going to have this illusion that you're getting better, but you're not. And that comes due to the concept of neuroplasticity. And what I mean by neuroplasticity is neuroplasticity basically means your body's ability, your nervous system's ability to create new connection, whether that be motor connection or cognitive connection, some sort of skill development. There have been several times whenever I go to these conferences and we go out the night before, have a couple drinks, right? Get a little crazy, do some dancing, whatever. The next day, if we're doing anything that's manually intensive, or manual intensive, for example, if we're learning on manipulating the spine. So you'll see physical therapists and chiropractors do this. Excuse me. This is rye whiskey, Bullet Rye whiskey, by the way, for those men of culture or women of culture who are out there wondering. So spinal manipulation is where you're cracking the back, basically, and it requires a lot of, I'll say, very much like jiu-jitsu. You have to learn where to place your hands, and you have to know how to move your body in certain positions to make it a safe movement for your patient. Those movements are not very smooth after we have the nights that we do, because alcohol has a detrimental effect on the nervous system. So does being catabolic for a long time, particularly if you do an aggressive weight cut like most people do. Most people in the combat sports, if they're, it's just kind of common practice to almost cut your calories completely out, like in half, maybe by 3/4, without really doing the math and seeing, okay, is this sustainable or not? You are not going to develop the same amount of skill in this cut leading up to your peak or leading up to your competition as you would if, let's say, you had reached your competition weight 4 weeks before and you could stay on a maintenance phase, get much better sleep, perform way better in the gym, and then that would almost certainly end in a better result in your competition. So those are the things that we think about whenever I think about whenever I hear people say that. Oh yeah, this is the worst. So, almost dead in a sauna covered in towels. We talked about, this is going to get into some of the political, I won't say political, but the social, I would say the psychosocial issues that I think are so pervasive in the combat sports. So this is, I think it's from a YouTube channel, Hanging with the Hughes, like I mentioned before. I'm gonna show a little clip here, and then we'll talk about it.
Easy money. At the end of the day, you're a family man first, right? So fighting comes second. So if he started passing out, like to where he was actually losing consciousness, we'd be done. We'd get him hydrated. We wouldn't continue to try and make the weight at that point. It's just, you know, safety first always.
So not only is that unsafe, I think it's morally reprehensible to put somebody through that. And I know that this person is doing it because they feel like it's the right thing to do, but there's got to be some part of them that thinks, man, this absolutely cannot be right. He actually ended up not making his weight for the fight. But the first thing I'll pop up here is something called rhabdomyolysis. And for those of you who don't know what rhabdomyolysis is, or more colloquially known as rhabdo, it's where your body starts to use muscle as a substrate for energy, protein as a substrate for energy rather than carbohydrates or fat. So it starts to break down your muscle, and the byproduct of that is messes with your kidney's ability to be able to function, and so your organs essentially start to fail. This is preventable with hydration, and since we can be certain that most of your body weight is being lost through water, you're setting yourself up for things like rhabdomyolysis. I'm not saying you will get rhabdo. I'm not saying that there's a high percentage chance that you will even get it, but the chance is higher. You are setting yourself up through dehydration to make yourself more susceptible to things like this. And that's not even the most egregious part about this. What I think is the worst part about this is that we've kind of developed this idea as a culture that transformation equals good performance or dedication or hard work. We even see it in Hollywood. You're not going to get a nomination for any award if you haven't transformed your body, like Matthew McConaughey for Dallas Buyers Club or something like that. The boards for that almost certainly look for people who have transformed their bodies in these crazy ways, albeit super unhealthy. How is that a good measurement for the ability to act? Let's talk about it in the combat sports. I mean, just because, you saw it in my thumbnail. Just because Conor McGregor or Max Holloway can cut an aggressive amount of weight and look like that on stage for the weigh-ins doesn't mean that it means they're dedicated, but for what reason? Right? Why are they actually doing it? I think this is the conversation that combat sports has to have. And then, not only are these transformations very unhealthy and have led to death and have led to the implementation of rules like, hydration clauses, and some federations have even, especially in fighting, you have to be within a certain amount of weight, like a certain percentage of your weight like a week before the fight to stop people from cutting so much of a percentage of their body weight before the fight. People actually glorify this. I mean, imagine getting so much positive reinforcement from changing your body and then doing it over and over and over again, and then your fighting career ends, right? Where is that going to lead? It's going to lead to eating disorders, and it's going to lead to the detriment of their mental health. On top of the fact that they've probably taken a little bit too many, especially in the fighting world, taken too many headshots. So when are we going to be honest with ourselves and say, hey, maybe we should dig a little bit deeper than just hydration clauses or, stating an 8% rule or whatever it is. This is just some food for thought and something that I think needs to be brought to the forefront of our attention a little bit more often. So let's end on a higher note, because that kind of brought us down a little bit. Look at swole Dumbledore here. The basics of weight loss is going to, what we cover in our next video primarily is going to be the basics of weight loss, particularly fat loss. Like I said, I think we can learn a lot from bodybuilders, particularly about the mitigation of loss of lean muscle tissue. And then tips for timing and goal setting, whether it be, I'm not sure if we'll actually get to water loading and electrolyte loading, because I think that deserves an entirely separate talk. The timing and the goal setting as far as when my actual competition is going to be, when do I need to hit that weight, and how do I peak properly. And then whether you should even be cutting weight or not, it really is for a select few people, particularly high-level people. But in your respective sport, but again, we'll get into that a little bit later in other episodes. So, I started Reddit. I got into Reddit. So I don't know what it's actually called. I think it's called a forum or community. I started a Reddit community called Combat Sport Injuries. Sorry, it's on here on the screen. But go on and post your injuries. Go participate in it. I've laid out my LCL injury and linked my YouTube video to it to try to get some things started. But I know a lot of people, particularly jiu-jitsu and MMA guys, hang out there. But as always, you can send your questions to my Instagram at CombatAthletePhysio or CombatAthletePhysio@gmail.com. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.